it's the end of the working week. Come on, happy Friday. You know what? I always used to think that Friday was a really sad day. But then I thought about it a little bit more, and it turns out that the next day is a Saturday. Let's take a look at the headlines. We have the reason Paul Heyman has been removed as Raw Executive Director. Monday Night Raw talent are said to be worried about their spots on TV. And we have the reason Charlotte Flair wasn't pinned at TakeOver in Your House. We'll tell you more in a bit. So first off, we have the reported reason that Paul Heyman has been replaced as Raw Executive Director by Bruce Prichard. This was announced late last night by WWE on their social media channels, and it came as a bit of a shock to a lot of people. However, and we'll talk about this more in just a little bit, perhaps not everybody within WWE, but we have the reported reason here from the Wrestling Observer. Dave Meltzer writing, the continued decline in WWE ratings have led to a change at press time as Bruce Prichard will take over as full creative head under Vince McMahon starting immediately, and Paul Heyman, at least in theory, will return to just being a TV performer. Obviously, we're not seeing much of Paul Heyman as a TV performer right now because Brock Lesnar isn't kicking about in WWE. So, will we see him soon? Maybe he'll get a new client. It's all speculation. Who knows? He's obviously such a great performer that I'd love to see him do more than just stuff with Brock. But anyway, Dave continues, when Heyman was hired in June, he apparently pushed the idea that they had to create new stars, and this would take 18 months or longer for them to build the credibility to be new stars with a new audience. It's said by those close to the situation that once the pandemic started, that McMahon's mentality changed about everything. Previously, the mentality was all about the future. That's great to hear, right guys? The XFL, long-term play. Not anymore. Raw under Heyman was a long-term play. Expanding NXT into Europe and Japan and opening up other markets under Paul Levesque was a long-term play. Who knows how that's panning out. Obviously, NXT UK aren't running shows at the moment, but that's due to the pandemic, and it's been reported by various outlets that those expansion plans have sort of been halted or at least postponed for the time being. He continues once again, now the mentality is to worry about what you have to think about now, even though the company is going to be more profitable this year and next than probably any time in its existence. McMahon was also frustrated, believing that much of the new talent being pushed wasn't getting over, and with no live crowds, it was pretty much impossible to tell what acts truly are and truly aren't starting to get a following. So I find that last point a little bit confusing because sure there are no fans right at the shows right now. And that's very difficult. It's more difficult for the performers to get over because crowd reactions are such a big part of getting over. Imagine Steve Austin without the pops and all that stuff. It wouldn't be the same, and that's what talent are having to deal with now. Obviously, they got one metric, which is TV ratings. Those haven't improved. In fact, they've gone downhill quite dramatically. But it's a completely different show that we're watching. You can't analyse that data in the same way that you would analyse data from 6 months ago. And again, this is meant to be a long-term thing. And so it's a bit confusing. There are other metrics that they could be using. They could be looking at YouTube hits, YouTube retention rate, social media engagement rate. All of these things they could be analysing, and maybe they're not doing so. Vince very, very much hung up on the TV ratings. It's worrying because it's Vince, I guess, getting cold feet again, and this is typical Vince, it seems. We've seen it before with the likes of Cedric Alexander, Humberto Carrillo, Ricochet, all people that Paul Heyman were really hot on, and he gave them a chance, and that was always going to be a long-term thing, and then they had the rug pulled from under them, and their pushes were cancelled or derailed, and now bloody Ricochet is doing the C shows, and it's baffling, and it's really, really gutting. And I think it's so foolish as well, because these things are long term. And sure, it's more difficult to ascertain which superstars are over with the crowd, but we can tell when people are doing a good job. It's like Drew McIntyre, obviously doing an amazing job. That's one that I'm really worried about here. Hopefully he's not included in the people that are worried about their spots. Speaking of which, let's talk about that now. Apparently WWE Raw Superstars are indeed worried about their position on TV. So once again, in the Wrestling Observer, Meltzer writes, much of the talent on the Raw side was concerned about this for obvious reasons. Most had never had a national push. Some had languished on the main roster before Heyman. And he continues saying, there was a joke that nearly 2 decades ago, Heyman built SmackDown around the so-called SmackDown 6. If you weren't watching at the time, an amazing time to be a fan of the blue brand. 6 wrestlers just having some of the best TV matches that you've ever seen, and Heyman was very much instrumental in making that happen. Now he was building Raw around the SmackDown catering crew, noting that most of the people on the show were people who were on SmackDown and getting no TV time, such as Andrade, Zelina Vega, Buddy Murphy, Aleister Black, Apollo Crews, AOP. Obviously, AOP is slightly different because Razor was injured and is unable to compete. I don't know why they've not used Akam. Like, he's been pulled away from Seth Rollins' group. Who knows what's going to happen there? And so that's... It's a big worry for a lot of those people. And he says here, with the exception of people like Edge, Rollins, Flair, Randy Orton, who are locked at the top due to tenure as stars with proven ability to talk, this would open up a question as to virtually every other wrestler on the Raw roster, including McIntyre. Don't get too worried, maybe get a little bit worried. But he does continue saying the belief is that McIntyre and Street Profits are liked by McMahon and probably safe, although they will be more subject to the whims of booking that way, and he may not protect them as well. As far as everyone else, it's anyone's guess. I would expect Raw to start looking very, very different over the coming months. As I mentioned earlier, some people very surprised, the talent seemed very surprised about this, who obviously thought that Heyman was doing a good job and people were getting new pushes and all that sort of stuff. But he does note, somebody from The Office said, I'm shocked it took this long. Everyone knew it was coming. Vince did not like Paul. Which is a real shame. Because Raw, I guess, was always going to maybe feel like it was in a bit of a slump. With the new faces being pushed so heavily, because I guess a lot of them have a little bit less experience, we're less familiar with them, but I think Heyman's done a pretty good job for the most part. Raw can be really hit or miss, but it's been exciting seeing these new faces pop up and prove themselves, and we're having amazing matches all the time on Raw, so hopefully that doesn't stop. I'm just worried that this is going to lead to like an oversaturation, even more of an oversaturation of like Charlotte Flair, or people that we don't really need to see that much more of. Like, if you're not, you need to invest in the future, right? It goes without saying, and it doesn't appear that Vince wants to do that. So why was Bruce Prichard the man who replaced Paul Heyman as the Raw executive director? Well, this isn't good news at all. Yeah, right. He says, it's hard enough to do 2 hours, let alone 3. So the idea Bruce would be in charge of 5 hours seems very difficult. Just in case you weren't aware, Bruce is doing the SmackDown side of things, but now he's doing Raw on top of that as well. So he's doing all 5 hours of the main shows. Whether Pritchard is the guy Vince needs in charge is something you can debate, but he's going to write what he perceives Vince wants, and if Vince doesn't want it, he's not going to argue it. He'll book the people based on how Vince has traditionally seen talent. But the workload is a question, and there are many other questions regarding creative coming out of this. So essentially, this is saying the reason that Bruce has been put in this position is because he's going to keep Vince McMahon happy. He's not going to talk back. And I think that's gutting, because I think time and time again, especially in recent years, it's been proven that Vince has some pretty out-of-touch ideas, not just recent years, a long time. Anyway, expect to see more run-of-the-mill Vince-style stuff. I imagine he's going to bloody love the piss segment on SmackDown tonight with Sheamus and Jeff Hardy. I can't wait for it. Can you? Brilliant. Next up, and if you weren't already angry enough, prepare to get just a little bit more riled up. As we have the reason that Charlotte Flair wasn't the woman pinned on Sunday night at NXT TakeOver in your house. It's written that the idea was to take the title off Flair while still keeping her perceived as superior. Since on the main roster with Becky Lynch gone, Flair is going to be pushed as the top female performer in the company. So, for everybody complaining about Charlotte Flair popping up on Raw, popping up on SmackDown, popping up on NXT, get used to it, because she is apparently going to be the one who is going to be pushed as the top female performer in the company. So yeah, just expect to see much more of her. I find it very, and I'm a big Charlotte fan, but I find it quite tedious at this point, how much we're seeing her. I got a little bit I was open to the idea of, even though I think Rhea should have won at WrestleMania, I was open to the idea of Charlotte maybe putting more eyes on NXT. And her just being there exclusively, and then there's maybe a reason for some people to watch NXT, but then she pops up on Raw, SmackDown as well. It doesn't feel special anymore, but it appears that that is going to be the strategy moving forward. So, yeah, just get used to it. Just get used to it. Next up, we have potential future plans for two recently released WWE Superstars. We are talking about Gallows and Anderson, who were, of course, part of that big round of cuts a few months ago. There are two options on the table for the Good Brothers. Reportedly, Luke Gallows and Karl Anderson are looking for what was described as two deals, so it's believed that they might want to do two things at once here. One of which would be New Japan, which would be the main deal. They would be spending the majority of their time there, and the other would be a US deal, and Impact is in play for the second deal, which is really interesting. Impact obviously teasing various former TNA and Impact wrestlers as coming back. Rusev as well being teased in a recent video that was released. Legally, they can't do anything before mid-July. However, with the timing of this, they could put pen to paper and they could pop up at Slammiversary, as Rusev is believed to be doing. We'll see. I think I'd love to see them go back to New Japan. Some of their best work. They were always used both sporadically and confusingly on the WWE roster. They had some great matches, sure, but we're all aware that they can deliver gold, and I think they'll continue to do so. So it's interesting to hear rather that it seems that they're going to be sticking together. It'll be good to see them on US TV. It'll be good to see them in New Japan. If all of these things happen, I think it's two guys with bright futures ahead of them. And finally, we are finishing on perhaps a little bit of a rumour killer. Now, if you didn't hear, Britt Baker recently gave an interview saying that potentially Adam Cole could head over to AEW. She would love him to be there in the coming months. It was believed that his contract was expiring soon and he hadn't put pen to paper yet. However, we've got a correction on this once again in the Observer, where it's been said that all four of the Undisputed Era signed long-term deals last year. So Dave writes, since there's been a lot of talk on the subject, back last fall when NXT AEW War was about to start, WWE made sure to sign a lot of the NXT key talent to new long-term deals, which included all four members of the Undisputed Era. So a confusing one, because this was picked up on following an interview with Britt Baker, Adam Cole's real-life partner. So I'm not sure why she would say something like that if it's not possible. No idea. I thought originally, okay, maybe the contract is expiring, and that's a bargaining tool for Adam Cole to go, well, I think I might head over there, give me some more money, but it doesn't appear to be the case. So don't expect Adam Cole or any of the Undisputed Era boys to go anywhere anytime soon. That's your lot for the news today. I'll see you tonight for the SmackDown stream. You can set a reminder right now, youtube.com/cultaholic/live. Loads of great stuff coming up over the weekend too. Backlash live stream on Sunday night. We've got a tier list. We've got some lists going up. We've got WTF. We've got graded. We got what happened to that rest. It's all kicking off. It's all good. Just stay safe. Love you lots. See you in a bit.